in the next 15 minutes. So I'm going to talk about the learners and what's happening with the learners in the current ecosystem. I'm going to talk about the institutions, and I'm going to talk about the educators. And given the theme for the conference, I'm going to focus particularly on the impact, both in terms of opportunities and challenges, the impacts of the AI disruption for all of those three stakeholder groups. So if I start with learners, on the platform today in the region, in Middle East and Africa, we now have 20 million registered learners representing 37, 38. What you see in the last graph is a projection to the end of the year with the 5 weeks that are remaining. And so we project that we will have about 38 million enrollments from 20 million learners in the EMEA region in 2024. Now again, if you think about the motivation, the reason for that growth in learners, it's predominantly this year, GenAI enrollments. On a global level, the number of enrollments that we had every minute last year was just 1. And this year, globally, we see 6. I think the slide is actually slightly out of date now. I think we just passed over 7. But in the region, the growth is even higher. And like I said earlier, we have more than a 10x growth, so more than 1,000% growth year on year in the number of GenAI enrollments in the region. Now, interestingly, I find it fascinating, again, particularly for those of you that are in the education business, and if you're instructors, educators, what we find is those are the top courses, so the most, the courses with the largest number of learners in the Middle East and Africa right now. And what we find is on the university partners, on the academic side, it continues to be, around soft skills and evergreen business skills, so to speak. So we have financial markets, successful negotiation. But then when it comes to technical skills, AI, students and learners, whether citizens, whether employees, they tend to look for industry content. So they prioritize not the AI courses from reputable universities, but they look for content predominantly from the top AI companies in the world, whether it's AWS, Microsoft, Google, and so forth. Google AI Essentials is the #1 course in the region. It's also the #1 course worldwide. And then #5 in the region is AI for Everyone, which is a deep learning course produced by Andrew Ng's company. If we think in terms of the growth, we see a direct correlation between, again, learner motivation, which often will be dictated partly by the demographics. So if you look at regions in the world with a younger demographic, we tend to see more growth because they want to see access to more opportunity. And so in the Middle East region, we're seeing 22% year-over-year growth, leading to 10 million learners at this point. And then you have the top 5 countries in learner counts, not in AI maturity or AI readiness that we talked about earlier, but we have a number of countries in the region that have obviously a large and relatively young population, and these tend to be the top countries from a learner's perspective. Now, interestingly, the demographics are a little different to our global averages. The age is actually the same, 32, when you take the region as a whole. But if you look at gender, men are learning more on the platform in the Middle East and Africa compared to our global average. And we also have more people learning on mobile, which is not a surprise at all. I think the mobile learners, what skews the dynamic here a little bit is Africa specifically. So on the African continent, the percentage of mobile learners is typically 80% or more. So we talked about AI as a disruptor, AI as an enabler. If there's only one slide from the entire presentation, that would likely be the slide. So on the left-hand side, what you're seeing is how artificial intelligence is transforming the needs of the jobs market, both from a skills perspective and the actual availability of roles and jobs. And then on the right-hand side, what you see is how can a technology company, an education company, actually use and leverage artificial intelligence to radically transform the way that we provide access to world-class learning for students across the world. And so in both of those contexts, both for jobs and skills, as well as for education, the implementation of AI will present challenges, opportunities, and it will present a number of risks as well. If you start from the jobs and skills perspective, there's either an upskilling or a reskilling priority or imperative. I'm going to feel like I have a reskilling imperative if my job is immediately threatened by AI. If you work in customer service, if you work in marketing, if you're a software developer, essentially any profession where language is a key component of what you do. Coding is a form of language. Marketing has a lot to do with manipulating words. If you think about even the function of sales or customer service, then you may even want to consider already reskilling. We have countries where we partner on a global level, not in this region, but where a very, very large percentage of the country is currently working in customer service. And then at the country level, you have a huge reskilling imperative because you know that 10–20% of your entire citizens are now going to need to find another job probably faster than it ever happened before. From an upskilling perspective, the question is, what are the new skills that I need to acquire to become even better and meet the productivity improvement expectations in my current job? So as Coursera, we created the Generative AI Academy for the upskilling priority and then the Career Academy for the reskilling imperative. Now, I want to focus on the teaching and the education fundamentals and what's changing there. Frankly, on the right-hand side, it's mostly opportunity. You will have noticed today some of you are wearing headsets and there's live translation taking place. Thank you. For us, if you think about our mission and our founder, and if the mission was world-class content, universally accessible, one obvious barrier is language. English is not my native language. I cannot address you in Arabic, sadly, today, so I don't speak to some of you in your native languages. And cognitive sciences have proven that the ability to retain information and recall information and process information is just vastly different when one communicates in their native language versus a second language, maybe even a third language. Now, with AI, we have the ability to translate content at a scale and at a fraction of the cost like it was never possible before. And I'll give you some specific numbers as it relates to costs and volume in just a minute. But language is the first barrier that is now shattered through the advances of AI, which is wonderful. The second one is personalized tutoring. So I talked already about Andrew Ng. Andrew is and we also have Barbara Oakley today in Dubai, and Barbara is a very renowned and esteemed teacher on the Coursera platform. She has a fantastic series around learning how to learn. And boy, I wish my boys, my children, my friends, they could learn from Barbara, but in a very personalized manner. They can already learn from Barbara by listening to Barbara's courses on Coursera. But what if they could have a dialogue with Barbara? What if they could exchange thoughts and ideas? What it would require is nothing more than for Barbara to actually train an AI agent, and the AI agent would be grounded in the courses and the content only from Barbara on the platform, and it could use a tone of voice and it could use a particular context that Barbara could preset and predefine, so that I, as a learner, would get a personalized tutoring experience at a scale that Barbara could never achieve before. If you compound these things one on top of the other, now imagine Barbara not only does this through AI in the course, but she does it in my native tongue, in my native language. The impact is, again, compounded and becomes really, really strong. So we have Coach for personalized tutoring on the platform. The third one, and again, I saw a few hands earlier when I asked if some of you were working on as educators, creating courses has historically been something really difficult and painful, and that takes a long time. Again, with AI, we have an ability to streamline, simplify. I can't do a demo today, but I know whenever we show this capacity, this capability to teaching staff, their eyes light up, because it's incredible the amount of time that is spent not in teaching, but actually in creating the content, creating the course. And if one could automate and simplify the course creation process, that would have massive impact. And so we have Course Builder to enable this. And then lastly, and perhaps the most controversial, I speak to universities several times a week, and one trend that I've observed particularly is the nature of the assessment has changed already since the introduction of GenAI. So for PhDs, if you use that example, for PhDs, where it used to be that the 100-page thesis or report would be 80% of the assessment, and then 20% of the assessment would be the viva, so the conversation, maybe the 20-minute, the 30-minute conversation where you could test the knowledge and the reasoning. Well, now it's flipped the other way around, because everybody knows generative AI is capable of producing incredible content, including long-form content. So now there's an ability to produce 100-page papers at a level of quality never seen before. And we're seeing a lot of higher education institutions now completely change the way that they do the assessments, and they extend typically the interaction with the PhD student, and they move from a 20-minute conversation to now a 1-hour conversation, 1.5-hour conversation. And so how can we embrace this within the platform, and online learning is also super exciting and lots of opportunities there. So if I drill down and give you more data points on each one, I'll go a little bit faster now. But as it relates to translation, just to give you a sense of the scale and use some numbers to illustrate how different the world is today from just 2 years ago. And those are internal numbers, but that we share now with the world. It used to cost Coursera $13,000 to translate one course. And now with machine translation, obviously the level of quality isn't 100%, but it's good enough to get access to learners who didn't before get access to the content at all. We've now taken the cost down from $13,000 down to $20 to $25 a course for subtitles. Now there's a lot of exciting innovation and new frontiers that are being pushed every day. So from subtitles to dubbing, from dubbing to video synthetic technologies, obviously with the consent of authors. But again, imagine if you could have your favorite teacher when you learn something at school, and you could choose to have that teacher teach you new topics in your native language with their typical demeanors. That would be an incredible opportunity. Right now we have 4,800 courses available in 24 languages. I think potentially most relevant to this region. Those 4,800 courses are available in Arabic, French, Turkish, and more languages as well. I talked about Coach and the interactive learning. The way that we think about the evolution of online learning since we started pretty much with passive learning, which is you learn from content and you consume the content. I think if you learn on YouTube or TikTok today, that would still be what we would refer to as passive learning. Then we moved into the world of active learning already maybe 10 years ago, where you had assessments and you had an ability to interact with the course, and there was a very specific curriculum, and instructional design became more important on the platform. And now we move from passive to active into interactive learning, where you have the ability throughout the learning to go to coach and ask a question. Is that relevant to me? Can you go back on that concept? Can you expand a little bit? So it's not just a rigid, active form of learning, but it becomes a personalized, interactive learning. Now, like I mentioned, coach is, I think the biggest value from coach is the grounding in expert and trusted content. So it's trained on the actual content of the platform. It's not trained on the web, and you don't share your data through the web either. You share it within the environment of the institution. If I move to educators, so I gave you a little bit of an insight in the world of learners. If I move into the educators, the second stakeholder group, we have currently 350 university partners and industry partners that collaborate on Coursera. So on this side of the slide on the left, you can see the university partners. And in the region here, we have Khalifa University, we have King Abdullah University of Science and Technology, the Jordan University of Science and Technology, and then Al Faisal University. There are content creators, content producers on the Coursera platform, university partners. In the last few months, we announced globally 4 new university partners, many of which are in the EMEA region, one of which is based here, the Dubai College of Tourism. On the industry side, we also added new partners in the last year, and they tend to be very specialized, either by vertical or by specific functions for content that learners are looking for. Now, one other trend that we're seeing outside of AI, which is seeing massive demand from learners, and institutions are rapidly evolving and embracing that demand, is this notion of professional certificates or micro-credentials. So how do I gain verifiable credentials for a new skill that I have learned? And if I approach it from a learner perspective, if I have the ability to publish this skill and make the world know that I've acquired this skill and it's coming from a reputable institution, then there's a high value placed on these types of skills. So we worked in the US with the ACE and in Europe with ECTS, which are essentially credential standards bodies. And now we have the ability to work with higher education institutions so that within their curriculum, they can integrate those professional certificates as micro-credentials for credit so that their students can actually learn from the best in the field on all of those skills, whether it be software and IT, data, or business. At this point in time, in the region, in the Middle East and Africa, we're already at 1.5 million cumulative enrollments for professional certificates. And in the last year alone, those are the 29 that we launched. Just to give you a sense of how fast this is evolving, we now have 70 professional certificates on the platform, up from 30, about 30, 25 to 30 just a year and a half ago. So this is a huge trend, and it's something that learners and students are now expecting from their institutions, whether employers or higher education. Interestingly, when I present this slide, I always have a smile because my 14-year-old boy was aware of the Epic Games, the game designer professional certificate. He knew that this was on the platform before I was aware of it, 14 years old. So I'm thinking clearly the world of education, the world of skills is changing radically. And actually we have conversations with already K-12 and higher school institutions that are looking to also integrate, not just higher education, but higher schools are also looking to integrate micro-credentials in their curriculum. So if you look at the surveys and if that's a demand from learners, what are universities saying? University leaders, 94% of them are saying that micro-credentials can strengthen career outcomes, so they're embracing the trend now. And leaders are saying that 53% of them are saying that they will offer micro-credentials in the near future. These are some of the instructors and faculty on the platform that have already engaged with us on the notion of interactive instruction. So when I used Barbara as an example earlier, Barbara is one of the instructors that has been already playing and with the tools on the platform to make interactive learning available. And those are the institutions working with us as well. I'm going to skip Course Builder. I think I talked about it just a little bit earlier. Course Builder is what provides this ability to streamline the process of creating courses and essentially reduce the time. What we've seen is a 5x growth, so 5 times the number of courses privately authored on the platform between last year and this year after the introduction of Course Builder. And we have 290,000 enrollments in Course Builder created courses so far this year. Now, the last topic that I want to touch on, and like I said, this one potentially is a little more controversial. There's a little more challenges and a little more risks, and then we work hard to transform the risk into opportunities, but academic integrity, also known as cheating, is very top of mind for anyone in the skills industry. Again, even the CEOs that I was referring to at the beginning of the conversation. When the CEOs are saying, I don't know that I have the skills in my company today, the next question is then, and if I do, how do I know? How do I measure what is the level of confidence that I can have in any credential, whether online or in person? Now that we have generative AI tools being so prevalent, how do I know that students are not cheating? And so we invested in a number of ways in the platform. One is proctoring. So we have an ability to use third-party tools and to use the camera to make sure that the learner is engaging in the content and only engaging in the content. We can block other windows. So we have technical approaches. But I think the most promising approach is number 4 on the slide here. I was referring to earlier the Viva and the PhD example. Well, you can take that to an online environment if you train the AI bot to actually know from the instructor the sort of questions that you want to ask. Then once you submit a document, you can use an AI Viva to actually ask questions on the document that was submitted and do essentially the type of work that a PhD reviewer, assessor would be doing with a PhD student. So this is still early days, but we have amazing feedback from the early implementations of AI Viva. And finally, so I talked about the learners, I talked about educators. The final piece of the ecosystem for us are the institutions. Again, in the Middle East and Africa, we're working with both private companies such as ADNOC. We're working with governments very much across the region and higher education institutions. I have UNDP here on the slide. We have a long-standing partnership with UNDP. 200 businesses and government entities across the region are using Coursera, and they represent 3 million employees and citizens that have been trained to date. From a higher education perspective, I think last week with the Prince Sultan University, who are very innovative in Saudi. We work with universities here in the UAE. The Abu Dhabi University is a partner, as an example, and the University of Dubai is also a partner of Coursera locally in the region. In total, we have 385 academic institutions, and they represent 3.5 million students. So like I said earlier, this is probably the one slide. I know I gave you a lot of data points, a lot of information. Like I said, we have the sources as references in the deck. I really welcome the opportunity to speak with you all, not just now, but after this conversation, I'd love to hear from you what you're seeing, how you see the world of jobs and skills evolving, and how online learning can participate in developing the skills that are needed. Just in closing, I would say when we think about our role and our mission, I started the conversation by talking about the founding principles, and the founding principles were around delivering world-class education in a way that is universally accessible. Now more than ever, when we look at the world, we see that talent is equally distributed. It's probably equally distributed in this room, in this region, globally in the world. Opportunity is not, and that's what we're working on with your partnerships. Thank you.